The US dollar isn't just money. It's power. It's influence. It's a global leash. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear: the dollar didn't become king because of free markets or fair competition. Its dominance was engineered, built on a series of quiet deals that tied the world's most important resource, oil, to American money. That system is what we call the petrodollar. And it's the hidden foundation of U.S. financial power, the reason America can print money at will while other countries drown in debt, and why wars keep erupting in distant deserts. Most people believe the dollar earned its place at the top. In reality, it was designed that way. To understand how the petrodollar was born, we have to go back to the end of World War II. In 1944, with Europe in ruins, the United States hosted the Bretton Woods Conference in New Hampshire. Delegates from 44 countries gathered to rebuild the global financial system. The deal was simple: the US dollar would become the world's reserve currency, fixed to gold at $35 an ounce. Other currencies would be pegged to the dollar, and the US promised convertibility: hold dollars, and you could exchange them for gold. For a while, it worked. America held most of the world's gold, its economy was dominant, and the dollar felt as solid as gold itself. Trust in the system was real. But by the 1960s, cracks began to show. The U.S. was spending recklessly, funding the Vietnam War and President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs at the same time. Dollars were printed to cover deficits, and the world was flooded with paper promises. Countries like France, led by Charles de Gaulle, started demanding gold instead of dollars. U.S. gold reserves began to drain, and the illusion of balance collapsed. Then came August 1971. President Richard Nixon went on national television and announced that the gold standard was being temporarily suspended. That temporary move became permanent. Overnight, the dollar was no longer backed by gold, only by trust in Washington. The world teetered on the edge of monetary chaos. If the dollar wasn't backed by gold, why should anyone keep using it? And then the oil crisis hit. In 1973, Arab members of OPEC imposed an oil embargo in response to U.S. support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Oil prices quadrupled almost overnight. Gas lines stretched for miles. Europe faced shortages. The world realized something critical: oil wasn't just another commodity, it was the lifeblood of the global economy. Whoever controlled energy controlled the future. Washington saw an opportunity. If the dollar couldn't be backed by gold anymore, maybe it could be backed by oil. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger quietly negotiated with Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil producer and OPEC's most powerful member. The deal was simple, ruthless, and transformative. Saudi Arabia agreed to price all its oil exports exclusively in US dollars. No matter who bought the oil, Japan, Germany, France, they would have to pay in dollars. In return, the U.S. guaranteed Saudi security, sold them advanced weapons, and promised to protect the Saudi royal family from both external threats and internal unrest. But the most important clause came next: the Saudis would recycle their massive oil profits, their petrodollars, back into the U.S. financial system by buying treasury bonds and depositing money in American banks. This deal, struck quietly in 1974, was never voted on by Congress or debated by the public. It was an agreement between elites. And it worked. Soon, every OPEC country followed. The petrodollar was born. From that moment on, if a country wanted oil, and every country did, it first had to get dollars. Even nations that hated the US had to hold its currency just to keep their economies running. The dollar was no longer backed by gold. It was backed by energy. Oil exporters suddenly had more money than they could spend at home. So they poured it into U.S. bonds, Wall Street banks, and American companies. Petrodollars flowed from the desert straight into the heart of the U.S. financial system. This gave America an endless credit line. The U.S. could run massive deficits, fund wars, and expand its influence without collapsing its currency, because global energy demand guaranteed constant demand for dollars. Wall Street thrived. Banks recycled petrodollars into loans for developing countries, especially in Latin America. At first, it looked like progress. Then interest rates rose sharply in the early 1980s, and the trap snapped shut. Debt exploded. Countries defaulted. A lost decade followed: austerity, IMF bailouts, and social unrest. This wasn't an accident. It was how the system worked. Profits flowed to New York and London. Pain was exported to the developing world. The dollar became a weapon. With the petrodollar, the US gained what the French called the exorbitant privilege, the ability to borrow endlessly in its own currency. Inflation could be exported. Sanctions could cripple entire nations. Financial power became geopolitical power. And when countries tried to escape the system, the consequences were severe. Iraq switched to selling oil in euros in 2000. 3 years later, it was invaded. Libya talked about a gold-backed African currency. In 2011, NATO bombs fell. Iran tried to bypass the dollar, and faced relentless sanctions. Officially, these conflicts were about security or democracy. But the pattern was clear: challenge the dollar, and you challenge US power. For decades, the system looked untouchable. But today, cracks are forming. China is buying oil in yuan. Russia sells energy outside the dollar system. Even Saudi Arabia has signaled openness to non-dollar payments. This won't end the dollar overnight. But it weakens its foundation. And that matters, because the petrodollar explains why US interest rates affect your mortgage, why inflation spreads globally, and why wars keep returning to oil-rich regions. Money is never neutral. It is always political. The value of your savings, the cost of your energy, even your country's freedom to choose its own path, all can be shaped by deals made behind closed doors. The petrodollar ruled for half a century. It looked unbreakable, until it didn't. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And monetary empires always fall the same way, slowly at first, then all at once. That's why real financial education matters, not classroom theory, but understanding how money and power actually work. Because if you believe the dollar's dominance is permanent, you're already unprepared. Hidden deals build fragile empires. They look invincible, until they crack. And when they do, those who understand early survive. Those who don't, get crushed.